This week on the Read Well podcast, I'm going to share with you the number one tip I have found to improve my habits as a reader, and hopefully it will help you. I'm also going to answer a question from a listener, Scott Murray, about taking notes in fictional work. How do you do that? How do you approach a classical piece of literature and actually be thoughtful about it? All right, that's in this week's episode of the Read Well podcast. Welcome to this week's episode of the Read Well podcast. My name is Eddie Hood, and I'm your host, where I believe it's more important to read well than to be well read. So grab your favorite book, open up your notes, and let's get ready to learn something fascinating. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Read Well podcast. This is episode 46, titled The Number One Tip for Improving Your Reading Habits. You know, I have had a lot of thought put into building reading habits. It feels like it's all I think about because it is what I blog about and write about and have conversations about. And I've got to say, there is one thing that has helped me more than anything to be a better reader, to be excited about books, to stay on top of that commitment to read. Because you know what, even though I love books and even though I want nothing more than to spend time with my books, sometimes I can't. You know, case in point, I've had somebody very special to me this week spend most of, the past 7 days really, in the hospital and in ICU, in the intensive care unit. It has been a harrowing week. We have not slept well. In fact, last night I was in the emergency room with this person until 2 a.m. because things are just challenging sometimes. And, you know, when those moments happen, which they will, and in case you're wondering, everything's fine, everybody's healthy, we're back on our feet. It's just been hard. But when those things happen, which they always seem to happen, you know, our best intentions for habits and doing things like reading books tends to get put on the back burner. There has been one thing that has kept me going during all of that stress, and that has been my membership in the book club that I host online. Now, if you've never been a member of a book club or you're already a member of a book club, I'd like to just talk about that for a minute and talk about why it has helped me and sort of the mental benefits I have personally received from that experience. I think the best way to put this into words is to refer to the book Atomic Habits by James Clear. I was just doing my book notes for that. I read this book a few times and I decided it was finally the moment to sort of gather all my thoughts together and publish them online because it's such a great book. But I came across a passage that got me thinking about this benefit of being in a book club. The passage was on page 118 and I titled it The Best Way to Build a Reading Habit. Clear says, nothing sustains motivation better than belonging to the tribe. It transforms a personal quest into a shared one. Previously, you were on your own. Your identity was singular. You are a reader, you are a musician, you are an athlete. When you join a book club or a band or a cycling group, your identity becomes linked to those around you. Growth and change is no longer an individual pursuit. We are readers. We are musicians. We are cyclists. The shared identity begins to reinforce your personal identity. This is why remaining part of a group after achieving a goal is crucial to maintaining your habits. It's friendship and community that embed a new identity and help behaviors last over the long run. I just thought that passage was beautifully written and expresses exactly how I feel. Reading books can be a solitary experience where I am obviously all by myself and I'm thinking by myself. And it is so nice on Tuesday nights to be able to spend time online with friends and people that I love and respect and have some conversations about books that are just intriguing. We talk about Dostoevsky and, Charles Dickens and all of these great works, but I think it's just really important that we have a group to turn to that we can share our love of reading with. And it's knowing that every Tuesday, these people are going to be there and that this conversation is going to be taking place. It really keeps me grounded and keeps me reading the book so that I can show up on Tuesday and have something valuable to say. I can't tell you how many times I've had in my life where I just haven't wanted to read because I've been too tired or stressed out with my businesses, or I have been stuck in the emergency room with a loved one. And so in the back of my mind, I'm always thinking, okay, well, book club's coming on Tuesday, so I want to be prepared for that. And it's interesting because I end up finding a way to take a breath, to find some space in my life, to open up the book that we're reading and to start taking some notes. If I didn't have that book club, I probably wouldn't do that on those challenging days. And I got to be honest with you guys, most days feel like they are challenging days. So to everybody who's in the book club, I just want to thank you for being there and for supporting me, for showing up every week with a smile on your face. It just brings me so much joy to be there with you. And it is just such a pleasure to have you in my life. I wrote a post a few days ago on my Facebook page and also on thereadwellpodcast.com about this very topic, about how being a part of a book club has made a difference in my life. And I recommended not only my book club, but 2 others that I think are worth your curiosity if you're thinking about doing this, becoming a part of a reading community. And I wanted to give you a couple different options because, picking the right book club is important. The one that I host might not be right for you. In fact, we read both fiction and nonfiction, but the main goal is to attend to books that have a philosophical focus to them. So that's why we love things like Dostoevsky and other things, because there are these bigger, grander themes that we can talk about. In my book club, we typically wouldn't be reading like the next murder mystery or the next romantic comedy book. That's just to say that there's nothing wrong with those. That's just not the genre that we're focused on. We're focused more on, we did Letters from a Stoic by Seneca, and we read a lot of essays. We've done Virginia Woolf. We've done lots of these sort of works that really make you think and pause and consider what things mean to you. So it's less about plot and action and romance and more about theme and philosophy and, the questions of existence, if you would like to put it that way. So I wanted to give you 2 other book clubs that maybe would fit the bill for you if the one that I host does not. So the first one is Hardcore Literature. This is hosted by Benjamin McAvoy. And he's just a fantastic personality. He's on YouTube. But Hardcore Literature is a book club that is really focused mainly on the classics. He spends a lot of time reading books like Don Quixote, Jane Eyre, and Anna Karenina, and these kinds of things. And he's very knowledgeable, and he's very passionate as a reader. Last time I checked, the membership in his club was roughly $25 a month, but it's really worth the effort. Everybody that I've met who has been a part of this club says that they love it. So definitely check that one out, Hardcore Literature. The third book club that I think you'll find interesting is titled The Enchanted Book Club. This is run by Haley Solano, and it's a group that really focuses on literary heroines and the authors who wrote them. So her selections would include things like Little Women, Charming Crossroad, and so on. And last time I checked, the cost for her book club was roughly $15 a month. The thing to really focus on here as you're looking for the right book club is to find one that focuses on selections that are of interest to you. So make sure to go to their page, their reading schedule page, and look at the books that are coming up and see if you really are going to be interested in that. But number 2, a good book club should be suggesting a pace for which to read the book. And so you might want to look at how quickly they're reading these books and see if that's something you can fit into your life. You might be really interested in reading the Brothers Karamazov, for example, but if the book club is prescribing 100 pages a day, you probably don't have time for that unless all you do is read. So really look at that and ask some questions. And then the third thing I would suggest is that the club itself has good ratings, that people are saying good things about it, of course, but that it is promoting a sense of open discussion and everybody's sort of allowed to participate. I'm not a big fan of book clubs where you go and the presenter is the only one that talks. Now, with that in mind, I'm really excited to tell you that on April 30th, I will be announcing the next 10 books that I will be hosting in my book club, the Read Well Book Club. And so if you are listening to the podcast, go ahead and mark that one. It will come out on April 30th. And again, I will be spending that whole podcast episode going through the 10 books we'll be reading in my online book club. And if you're interested in joining the club that I host, all you got to do is go to thereadwellpodcast.com, and then up in the navigation, there is a link that says Book Club. If you click on that, it has our reading schedule, the cost, which is $9 a month, and information on how to join and when we meet and so on. And yes, if you're curious, every meeting is recorded so that you can watch it at a later time if you can't make the online events. Okay, before we get into the question from the community this week, I want to take just a second to thank you all for going to Apple Podcasts and leaving me a review. We're up to 41 reviews now, and that has put us at 4.7 stars, and I can't thank you enough. The most recent one is from Bianca Sarka, and she wrote, "I love the podcast. Each episode has interesting ideas and book recommendations, and Eddie's love for reading is contagious." I really appreciate that, Bianca. It's a small thing, but it does take time to leave those reviews, and it means a lot. And I've got to be honest, Apple does not do a stellar job of making it easy for you to leave a review. So for those of you who are going out of your way to leave that for me, thank you very, very much. I'd like to take just a second to hit pause on this show to tell you about the ReadWellPodcast.com. If you go there, you can subscribe to my weekly newsletter on reading deeply. Simply go to TheReadWellPodcast.com, enter your email, and I'll send you a message every Wednesday at 9 a.m. on how to become a deep and thoughtful reader. Thanks for listening. Let's get back to the show. One of the best parts about my job here in the podcast chair is that I get emails occasionally or Facebook messages from you about questions you have regarding reading or habits around reading, note-taking, and so on. And this week I got an email from a gentleman named Scott Murray, who I thought asked a really great question. He wrote, "I'm intrigued by the idea of note-taking, but I'm not sure how to go about it. I read mostly fiction, but even the nonfiction I read is for pleasure, not for gaining skills." He writes that he's retired. "I just have a sense that I could get more out of my reading. Maybe note-taking could be a part of that. I've been on a top 100 of all time kick lately, Toni Morrison, Mark Twain, etc., and have no trouble making marginal notes, but I'm certainly not scientific. What's your take on taking notes on classic novels?" What a great question, because I think nonfiction books, of course, lend themselves really well to taking notes. Obviously, you're going to that book to learn a specific topic, interest, or skill. But when we're dealing with fictional work, how do you and should you be taking notes on those books? And I think the answer is absolutely yes. Anytime you find something memorable in life, it doesn't matter whether you're reading. I think there's value in making a note for that thing. It really shows your mind, the universe, whatever you want to call it, that this thing is important to you and that it means something and that you want to keep it and use it later on. So I feel like notes are sort of this investment or this treasure, and every time I make a new note, it really adds to the value of my entire database of notes. And so, yes, Scott, I think there is a large amount of value in looking at a fictional work and taking notes. And now I don't want you all to think that I'm being pretentious and saying, well, we should only take notes on Shakespeare and Charles Dickens. You know, if you're reading, I always use Stephen King because I love Stephen King, or Agatha Christie, and you're reading one of their books and something strikes you, make a note for it. I think there's something to be learned in all forms of art and literature, and we should read widely and enjoy all of it. So to answer this question, I came across a really great article, which was recommended to me consequently by a member of the book club. So Steve, if you were listening, thank you so much for sending this article to me. It was written by Daniel Torre in a publication titled Philosophy Now, and the article itself is called Plato versus Literature. So here's the quote, and the reason why it caught my eye is because the author, Daniel Torre, is referencing my favorite fictional work of all time, Crime and Punishment by Fyodor Dostoevsky. Let's see what he has to say. Torre says, "Take Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment, 1866, and its problematic main character, the human rain cloud Raskolnikov, whose dilemma is a fictional battering of emotions which is recognized as true in the mind of the reader. As Raskolnikov wrestles with himself and his actions, he's murdered two very unsavory people. We, the readers, are asked to contemplate what we would do, how we would feel in response, and to analyze what we have perhaps taken for granted, all within an entirely imaginary world, a world that only presents itself as real because the story is set in a real place. Taking an imaginary scenario and using it to make a higher point is what literature is about, not simply mimesis as Plato suggests." Now that last line there, if you are not a philosophy student, might sound a little weird. Really quickly, we're talking about the philosopher Plato there, and he had a term called mimesis, which is to make a copy of something. And Plato was not a big fan of literature because he felt like every time a piece of artwork is being created, it's really just a copy of something else. And when you copy something, it's usually of lesser quality than the original thing. This conversation's not about Plato, so we're going to skip back to this whole crime and punishment thing. What does this have to do with Scott's original question about taking notes in literature? Well, the author of the article does a great job of pointing out that in Crime and Punishment, there is something very philosophical happening, something emotional, something tragic. There is a big theme here, and it is the theme of murder and how it weighs on your soul. Now, this is the beauty of literature. You can read about something and you can hear it and you can experience the questions that come with that experience without actually having done the thing, which is great because, I'm hoping we're all avoiding the act of murder, right? But I think we can relate to the idea of having done something wrong in our lives and knowing we did something wrong. So when you read Crime and Punishment, there are a couple ways to take notes here. I love to capture passages that just sound great, right? There are little quotes I want to remember, things about maybe something a character said that I think, oh, that's really pithy. I want to keep that for my writing, or I want to just add that to my bank of quotes that I love. That's a really nice way to keep track of stuff happening in a fictional work. But on a larger scale, I would challenge you to try to identify the major themes of that work and then the questions that are coming along with it. So here in Crime and Punishment, we're talking about the act of doing something wrong and how it weighs on the soul. That's the major theme there. And the questions that Daniel Torre suggests we ask are, what would we do in that situation? How would we feel? What do we take for granted? And these kinds of questions. Now, if you were to read Crime and Punishment, and then at the end of that, you're going to have some thoughts. Now, if it's a book that is full of this sort of thematic response, then you're going to want to take notes on it. And I want to point out really quickly here that not all books are created equal. I don't take notes on all fictional work. Only after I read a book, if I sit back in my chair, put my hands into my hair and go, wow, that book blew me away. And it blew me away because of this, and this. That was just foundational, right? When a book does that, I then go back to page 1 and I start again. But this time, I have a piece of paper, my notebook, or my note-taking system ready to go. I'm not really prepared to take deep notes on a fictional work before I get started because I don't really know what it's about, unlike a nonfiction work. With nonfiction, I can go to the table of contents, I can look at the chapters and say, okay, I'll be learning about this, and this. I sort of know how to structure my notes. I can be prepared. I don't have that in a fictional work. So I have to read through that fictional work once just to get the lay of the land. Once I know where the hills and valleys are in this thing, then I can go back, read it a second time, and be ready for those big thematic questions. And as they come up, I can begin to answer them. So I like to start by identifying before the second reading what the major theme is, and then I'll write down any questions that are going to be pivotal to understanding this work better. I'll add those to my notes, and then as I'm reading the book again, I will use my highlighting system that I always use. I talk about it all the time. I have a colored highlighting system, which I won't get into in detail here because it's not important, but just highlight your book or take notes like Scott's doing in the margins as you're going. But then as you come across passages that are answering those bigger thematic questions, hit pause and take a moment to journal about them, to make a note about them, and so on. And when you're done reading the book for the second time, you'll have a piece of paper or several pages of notes that will reflect these big, heavy questions. And I would suggest that you answer the questions in a first-person perspective. So if you're reading Crime and Punishment, instead of taking note about what happened in the book, right? Raskolnikov did X. The idea here is to say, Raskolnikov did X, and here is what I feel about that. Here's how it makes me feel, right? Here's my reflection on how I've lived my life so far and what I hope to live my life as. So the whole point of fiction is to help us have more empathy, to gain a grander worldview, and to sort of see ourselves in a new light. If you don't see yourself in a new light when you're reading fiction, you're missing the point of fiction, right? It's supposed to help you be a better human. That's the goal. That's an aesthetics question, another philosophy idea, the concept that art really can help you transcend this paradox of being human, sort of the drudgery of being alive because you wake up every day and you do the same thing and you stub your toe and you spend half your week in the hospital and you got to pay the bills and you got to go to work. Art is supposed to elevate you above all of that so that you can live on a higher plane. And again, it's not about being pretentious. It's about seeing the beauty in things and being appreciative of them. But the only way to do that is to ask, what do I think about this? I think when people start taking notes on their fictional books, it feels like going back to high school a little bit, and they end up writing a book report. Again, Raskolnikov, who's the main character of Crime and Punishment, did this, and this, and it's just a listing of events, and then they say at the end. And it really shouldn't be that. When you take notes on a fictional work, it should be your personal, guttural, passionate, emotional, sensory response to these things that are happening, and also how they're going to help you live your life in a better way. All right, everybody, that's it for this week's episode of the Read Well podcast. I hope you found value in that. Now, before you go and hit pause, I would just like to ask you one major thing. Again, I am ramping up for season 2 of the Read Well Book Club. I am so excited to get the next 10 books up on the website so you can see what we're reading. And all I can tell you is this. I'm not going to create any spoilers here, but I'm so excited. So check in next week on April 30th as I release the episode on the 10 books we will be reading in the book club. And I hope you find some excitement or joy in that. And if you feel like some of those books are books you've wanted to read your whole life but haven't, then please consider joining our book club. It's just $9 a month. It's easy to do. And I will also say one last thing. Usually in a book club, there might be something on the list that you've already read. You know what? That's okay. If you have already read the book, I try to pick books that are really, really worth the time to read. And so the concept here is that some books are so good that they're worth being read twice. Okay, go to thereadwellpodcast.com, click on the book club link up at the top, check out the reading schedule, and watch for next week's episode to drop so that you can see what we're reading, and go ahead and join when you are ready to do so. I hope to see you in the club. I would love to meet you. I would love to talk with you face to face and hear your thoughts and your passions about books. Let's grow together. Let's have fun in this community. And until next week, remember, as always, to read slowly, take notes, and apply the ideas. I'll see you next time. If you'd like to take your reading to the next level, then head on over to thereadwellpodcast.com. There you'll find daily posts on how to read well. You'll also get access to all of my book notes and tools for becoming a better reader. And as always, don't forget to read slowly, take notes, and apply the ideas. Thank you for listening to the Read Well podcast.